Good evening, everybody.
Couple Tav, how are you?
Oh, Hashem, thank you. Okay, so looks like we're going to bet. Yeah. So he says here like this. Katav Abi Ezri. All right, it says this rabbi, Bizman hazeh shen nagilut be'artzenu le'aseh v'yosher kedarko. So he says nowadays, right, the custom is not really to eat reclining, you know. So therefore he says you should sit like in a normal manner. ואינו צריך להסב כשהוא מסב על יתה על גבו ולא על פניו. So another thing he says is that when you recline, you should not recline to the front or to the back, velo al yamino, and not to the right, ela al samolo, right, only to the left side. So let's see the Bit Yosef, and we'll get back to this. So as we said, right, that the Abi Ezri says that nowadays people don't recline. So Kakatav Mordechai, it says that Mordechai also wrote this, Perek Areb Psachim, over there in Lamed Al Amud Bet, Gemara, B'Shem Ravan, the name Ravan. V'gam HaGaot Maimon. So we have several rabbis who wrote this. Katav Ken B'Shem Ravia, also Ravia. V'katvu Alav the Yachid Hu B'Davar Hazeh. So they wrote that this is like single opinion, minority opinion. כלומר, שדעת כל הפוסקים שלעולם בaya seba ואפילו בזמן הזה. So most of the poskim seem to hold that we do have to recline even nowadays, right? Even though the custom is not like that nowadays, recline when you eat. So therefore, right, we don't paskin like this Avi Ezri, but there is some, anyway, significance to this Avi Ezri in halacha. Never, even though we don't paskin like that, and we'll get to that in a second. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch. So first of all, right, we said in the Beit Yosef last week, the tour. יסדר שולחנו יפה. The person, כלים נעים כפי כוחו. The person should have nice utensils, right, on the holiday, according to his ability, according to his financial ability, whatever. ויכין מקום מושבו שישב בסיבה דרך חירות. And also, as we said, right, that he should prepare his seat, that it should have a place to recline there. So says the Rama, "Vafilu ani she'en lo karim yeshiv al sapsal." So he says, even Rama says, even a person is poor. So what does that mean? He doesn't really have, like these pillows, stuff like this. He should sit on a stool. He says. So in other words, the point is that you do the best you can according to your financial ability. And so nowadays, by the way, the custom is, in the that you should have something to recline on. They bring something for you to recline on. So how does that work? For instance, let's say if your chair has handles, right? So you can use the handles. That's already good, going to be good enough. But if you don't have handles on your chair, so then you want to bring something to lean on. In the old days, they used to bring these pillows and stuff. They still do that today. Some people, they bring pillows to recline on. Depends on your seating arrangement, right? How you have your seating arranged. So we should do it, right? And even if you don't have, by the way, anything to recline on at all, let's say you have no pillows and you have no arm on your chair, you should still recline anyway, right? What does that mean? Recline in the air. So you can still do it, just it's a little bit harder. So what does that mean? I'm not telling you you have to do that all the time, because otherwise, you're going to get a backache or something. Right. So at least, the minimal is that when you're doing the mitzvot, like, eating the matzah and drinking the 4 cups of wine, and also eating the afikoman afterwards, you should be reclining for those things. Good. So let's go to next one, Gimel. So he says like this, right? As we said, right? When you recline, you have to recline to which side? Not the front, not the back, not the right, only the left. So then so says the parentheses here, so it doesn't matter whether you're lefty or righty. You should recline on the left side. So the reason why we shouldn't recline on the right side is because they say, right, that there's a danger that the food may go down into your windpipe. Because when you recline on your right side, it opens up the windpipe. So therefore, you should not do that. It's dangerous. So you should always be reclining on your left side. This is the general rule, right? So yeah. And what about not in the back, not in the front? Because that's not really the way to recline. You know what I mean? For being a person who's aristocratic or free or whatever, emancipated, that's not the way. So it's they recline to their side. But the question is which side? So as we said, right, it should be the left side, not the right side. Okay, good. That's the one. So we'll go to Dalit. Yeah, it seems like we didn't read the Bet Yosef, so I'll just read it now. Shulchan said, right, as we said, Perek Arab Psachim. It says over there in Psachim, Kuf Chet Amud Aleph, that you should recline on your left side. So Prakadon lo sheme heseba ve'esh mefarshim the Prakadon היינו על גבו ויש מפרשים על פניו ורבנו כתב כדברי שניהם וכך כתב הרמב"ם. So he says, right, that in the Talmud it says that a person should not be reclining to the front or to the back. That's not the proper way. And he brings also, right, the Rambam also that writes that as well. Umash katav velo al yamino, and that which we said, right, not to recline on your right side. Hesebat yamin lav shmei heseba velo od ela shemei yakdim mekenen lebeshet. So he says, right, first there's two things. One is that reclining to the right side is not really called reclining, and number two, as we said, right, there's also a problem with the windpipe. You can get into danger like that. So what does that mean that on the right side it's not called reclining? Because he says you have to eat on the right side. הפרקדון שמתוך שצווארו שוחה לאחוריו, כובע והסותם את פי הקנה, נפתח ומתקבל למעלה, והמאכל נכנס לתוכו ונחנק כדי, כך פירש רש"י. So, right, he explains that, it's a choking hazard when you're reclining on the wrong side. This is the problem. Actually, אמי לא סמכי להי ולא הסבת ימין ורבותיי פרשו שמי יקלים קנה לבשת הרבה על דרך ימין ונפתח הכובע שעל פי הקנה מאליו כשהוא מטה כלפי ימין ולפי זה נתחלף רבינו פירוש רש"י ופירוש רשב"ם ופירוש רשב"ם לפירוש רש"י. So he says here, right, that there's two different explanations regarding this. Some say that when you recline towards your back, it causes a choking hazard. Some say it's when you recline to the right. Two different opinions. So that's why we don't do either of them, right? We don't recline to the back or to the right. So one opinion is Rashi, one opinion is Rashbam. ומה שכתב על פירוש כמה, ולפי זה איתר יד ימינו יתה על ימינו, ועל אידך פירוש כתב לפי זה, אין חילוק בין יתר לאחר. So then, right, he talks about the issue of a person who's left-handed. So let's see the tour inside there, because I don't think we read this. So he says, right, like this. So according to this, he says that a person who's left-handed should recline on the right side. Rashi piresh hatam shelo yakdim kaneh lebeshet ulfi ze ein chiluk ben iter leacher. So, but according to Rashi, who says, right, that the problem is that it's a choking hazard, it doesn't really matter whether you're left-handed or right-handed. So when does it matter? If you explain like the first opinion, which says that it's not the way of reclining like that. So that's really something else. Let's go back to the bit Yosef. Regarding this, says bit Yosef, Pashut says it's obvious. פשוט הוא, וכך כתב שם הראש, the Rosh also writes this, וכתב בתרומת הדשן, שולט בשתי ידיו פשיטא דרכו לעם מסב בשמאל. So it says also somebody who's ambidextrous, he definitely should, recline on the left side like everybody else. But the Tama, the Shem Yaktim Ita Veidach Tama Leta. Because we do have the issue of, still the choking hazard. וביתר כתב נראה דשפקינן טעמה דצריך לאכול בימין, מקמה טעמה דשמא יקדים דהית בסקנתא וחמילה סקנתא מיסורה. So it says also, right, the more important reason here is because of choking hazard, because danger is more important than prohibition. So therefore, that's the main reason why we don't do it. Okay. Good, we're done with that. So that was Gimel. So we did the Shulchan Aruch. That's great. Now let's go to Dalid. So it says the Tur in Dalid, right? As we said last week, women don't really need to recline, according to the Talmud, as we said, right? So Piresh Rashban explains, "Mipnei emat bala." Why is that? Because right of the fear of her husband. Shekfufalo v'katav because she she's under his wings, right, under his authority. So therefore, right, katav arosh lufi zeh almana grusha bein eseba. The Rosh says, according to this, right, if she's not married, let's say she's a widow or divorced, whatever. So then she does have to recline because there's no issue of the authority of her husband there. ושרטוט דרבי יחי כתב דלאו אורחא דנשת למזגה. So he says, right, the shirtot, that's not the way of women to recline. ולפי זה אפילו אלמנה גרושה נמי, so according to this, even if she's a widow or divorced, that would apply as well. אבל אישה חשובה אורחא דמזגה, but he says a woman who's prominent, she does recline. ורבנו שכתב בהג, במקום shirtot. So he says the Tur wrote Bahag instead of Sheltot. The Rav Achai lo dak ve'efshar shegam Bahag katav k'divrei Rav Achai. So it could be that they both hold that way. Ulechach katav ken Rabbeinu bishmo ve'lo chashash le'azkir divrei Rav Achai. So okay, so the point is like this, right? That we have several different opinions why this is the way it is, why women don't recline, right? But the point is that in the Talmud, it says they don't recline unless she's a prominent woman, right? So that's the beginning, right? Isha chashubat tzricha eseba. But as we said, right, if she's prominent, she has to recline. So it says Rabbeinu Yerucham regarding that. בשם התוספות, נין תוספות, שכל הנשים שלנו חשובות. So he says, right, that all our women are prominent. In other words, they have a high position in the family, right? The women. Women are, like more respected in the Jewish world than you have in the, the non-Jewish world, where women are like, abused quite a lot. There's a lot of abuse going on, in the non-Jewish world. Women are, thought of as like, kind of like servants, whatever. But in the Jewish world, right, the woman is like a queen in the house, so they're more prominent. That's what he's trying to say. But also, there's another thing, which is in some cultures, the woman has a higher position in the house, right? So that's another thing. So, that's what Tosfot says, right? That in our culture, right, which was in France, so over there where they lived or whatever it was, right, in those areas, the women had a higher position. So therefore, they're considered to be prominent. Even if they're not entrepreneurs, right, or whatever, right, or some kind of a congresswoman or whatever, it doesn't matter. Still, they're prominent. Okay. So he says, therefore they have to recline. Also, Mordechai says this. So, right, so also, right, you see from there that it depends on the culture, what kind of culture you live in. And that really also applies, to that makes the prominence of the woman vary depending on the culture. So in the Eastern countries, the women are more like subservient, so therefore, they're not so prominent. But in the European countries, they're more prominent, the ladies. They're more independent. So it depends on the culture. That's what we're saying. Okay, so that's the idea. And okay, let's see the Shulchan Aruch on this one. So it says in Shulchan Aruch, Isha inat tzricha yaseba, right? As we said, the women don't need to recline. Ela in ken hui chashuba, unless she's a prominent woman. That's the Shulchan Aruch. And it comes to Ramah and says, Hagam, kol hanashim shalanu mikre chashuvot. But it says, right, but in our culture, the women are prominent, so therefore they do have to recline. Ach, lo nahagu lesev ki samchu al divrei Arabia. But he says, anyway, the custom is not to recline. Look what he says, the Rama. Interesting. Right? He says, even though the women are prominent, but they rely on the Raviyah, who says that what? That nowadays, anyway, you don't have to recline because of the, today, the culture, even for the men, is not to recline. So, all the more so for the ladies. The katab is manazeh en sev. So, he says, therefore, right, in our times, you should not recline. So, okay, so, right, but as we said, right, that nowadays, the Achronim, the later authorities have said, the women should recline, right, in our times. Because, all these things that, we mention here don't really apply so much in our times, that the women are so, subservient and, they're so, right, the women today are more independent. They have jobs. They go to school, they get degrees, and, right, they go to college, God knows what, right? College is not a good thing, by the way. Even for the men, it's not good. But anyway, right, I'm not talking about that, right? But they're educated. That's what I'm trying to say, right? They're educated, and so therefore, right, today the rule is in most communities nowadays the women do recline because we live in a different world. Today it's not the same thing. But I mean, according to the Talmud, as we said, they're not obligated. So therefore, if they did not, and they did some of the mitzvot without reclining, they don't have to go back and do it again. Because anyway, right, by them, it's not really an obligation so much. It's just nowadays it's more like a custom, whatever you want to call it. Okay, good. Let's go to Hey. Let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says about this, by the way. Let's see what he has to say. Yeah, so he doesn't bring this to Mishnah Berurah that but I saw in other achronim that they bring this that the nowadays the custom is that the women do recline. Okay, interesting. So either way, whichever way a woman does, she has what to rely on. Either way. But I did see in some books, that they say that they should that today now the custom is to recline by the women. Okay. Anyway, that's the story. Let's go to Hay. So now, right, the Torah comes and says like this: Ben etzel aviv tzarich heseba v'tamid etzel abo en tzarich heseba. So now the question is like this, right? What about the son with his father, or the student, right, the disciple with his rabbi? Do they have to recline, or do they have the authority of their father or their rabbi, right, to worry about? So he says, right, that when it comes to father and son, the son does recline. When it comes to the Talmid, with the rabbi, the disciple, he does not recline. So why is that? I guess that the point is that if you as a disciple recline in front of your rabbi, it's like you're disrespecting him, and this is the reason why you don't have to you don't need to do that. So let's see what else we got here. Mashkatav Gabet Ben Etzel Aviv Afilu Hu Rabba Mubhak. Right. So he says also another thing to Torah, which is that let's say we're talking about father and son. And also the father is also the rabbi of the son. He's also his rabbi, his main rabbi. So what about that? Right? Even there, it seems like כן כתבו שם תוספות והראש, טעמיו משום סתם בן אביו זה למדו תורה, אפילו האחי כאמר בפני אביו צריך להסבה. So he says, right, that, usually, right, a father teaches Torah to his son. That's usually the case. So if that's the case, right, and you still see that, they do recline. So therefore, even if the father is the son's rabbi, he still, the son should recline. Right? But what about just a regular rabbi who's not your father? You don't have to recline. Even though he's not your main rabbi. That's what it says in the name of these rabbis. So it's coming from the Gemara. Unless your rabbi gave you permission, he says, right? The Torah. If your rabbi could give you permission to recline, you can recline. So the Rambam also writes this, and why is that? Because it says in the Gemara, ki havinan be mor zeginan birche dehadade ki atinan lebe Rav Yosef amar Onan lo tzrichitu mora rabech kemora shamayim. So, right, there's a story brought down here in the Gemara that the rabbi told, right, to one of these people, you don't have to recline when your rabbi's there. Okay, Alma dechol shenatan lo rabo reshut. So you see from there that if your rabbi gives you permission to recline, that's shy. You're allowed to recline. Because otherwise, how was this rabbi allowing him to do something which is forbidden? So therefore, you see from this Gemara that when you have permission, it's okay. And since he was watching this and being silent, it's considered to be like he gave him permission. The fact that he didn't object. ועוד, אמר לרב יוסף, לא צריכיתו ולא אמר אסור לכו למעבד לכחי. So he said, you don't have to recline. He didn't say it's forbidden. אמינן בגמרא שם, לתלמיד אומנות לפני רבו, צריך הסבה. וכתב הסמ"ק. So, right, it says in the Gemara there that if you're just like an apprentice of your boss, so there you do have to recline. Katav Samak says in the Samak, the Ebed Difnei Adono Eno said. What about a slave with a master? So there he doesn't recline, right? Because he has the authority of the master. Katuv Betumat Adeshin says in Tumat Adeshin, Shebala Bait Hasoed Belela Pesach. So he says, right, that the layman who is eating on the night of Pesach, it's a Talmid Chacham with some Torah scholar, Muflag Bidoro, who's like the great Torah scholar of the generation. Even though we never learned anything from him, it's considered to be like his rabbi. So therefore he doesn't have to recline. So what do you see from there, right? There's a general rule like this, that when there's a great rabbi of a generation, Gadol Hador, we call that, right? So there, even though you didn't learn from him, he's considered to be a rabbi because he's everybody's rabbi. Everybody has to follow him, since he's a great scholar. So therefore, right, you don't need to recline. Okay, great. So let's see the what else we got here. Yeah, let's see the Shulchan Aruch. So says Shulchan Aruch, as we said, Ben Etzel Aviv Tzarich Eseba, right? When it comes to father and son, the son should recline. Afilu hu Rabbo Mubhak, even though he's his rabbi, main rabbi, Talmid lifnei rabba. What about the disciple in front of his rabbi? And not tzarich chesed. He doesn't have to read Chalklaim. Afilu eno rabbo mubhak, even though he's not his main rabbi. Elaim ken yiten lo rabbo reshut, unless the rabbi gives him permission. Talmid chacham muflag bedoro. What about the great rabbi of the generation, Al Gadol Ador? Even though he didn't learn anything from him, Chashuv Kirabo is considered like his rabbi. He doesn't have to recline. That's the whole thing, right? That's only when, right? It says in the parentheses here, when they're eating on the same table, right? So that means that it's like one group. Shulchan bifnei atzmo, but if he's eating by a separate table, right, by himself, he does have to recline. That's what he says in the parentheses here. So what's the logic of that? Since you're not sitting together with your rabbi, you're in a different table, so it's not really, not considered like disrespectful or whatever, his authority is over you because he's not there with you. Exactly, in the same place that you are. Same table. Okay, interesting. So yeah, good. Let's see if we can pull off another one. Yeah, I guess we can do this one. Vav. So it says over here, Hashamash Anot Tzarich Haseba.
Kabbalah Taraf, I'm sorry. Can you repeat one more time? If he's sitting at a different table, not as the rabbi, he does not have to recline, or yes?
So if he's not on the same table, there's no issue of authority there because they're not in the same place. So therefore, he should recline.
Thank you.
Right. So here we see, right, and it says in the Torah, Shamash Enot Tzarich Haseba. What about the Shamash, right? What is Shamash? He's like a butler, right? Somebody, a waiter, right? So if he's a waiter or a butler, whatever, right, in somebody's home, whatever, so he doesn't need to recline. That's what it says. So says Bet Yosef, right, that this is a mistake. What does that mean? Somebody copied over wrong, right? This halakha. So he's not trying to tell you that the Torah made a mistake. What he's trying to say is that it wasn't copied over by somebody, right? It's a misprint. So therefore, right, it really should say that the shamash should recline. Because it says that's what it says in the Talmud, that the waiter or the butler does recline. That's what it says in all these Rishonim, right? Rif, Rosh, Rambam, Rambam, וגם רבנו כתב כן בסימן תפ"ו. Also, the Torah himself writes that in a different place. So you see from there, right, that the proper text in the Torah should be that the waiter or the butler does require to recline, is required to recline. Okay, good. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch. As we said, Hashamash tzarich haseba, right? That the butler or waiter, whatever, needs to recline. So what's the reason for that? Because just because you're a waiter or you're a butler, it doesn't mean that your boss is like some kind of authority over you. You know what I mean? When it comes to spiritual matters. I mean, he may be your boss, he's your employer, but it doesn't mean, right? So, we never said, right, that you don't have to recline when your boss is there. Because your boss, is just somebody that you work for. He's not your, spiritual guide or whatever, or some kind of authority in your life. He just, you happen to work for the guy. So that's not really, relevant in this case. So therefore, when you're right with your boss, whatever, right, whatever it may be, you're his waiter or you're his butler, you have to recline because he doesn't have any spiritual authority over you. He's just your employer. Let's see what the Mishnah Berurah says. I'm interested to see. Yeah, pretty much that's what he's saying here, right? That he still has the obligation to display emancipation, right, and prominence that night, like every other Jew. So his boss is not really, his authority or whatever. He just pays him a salary. That's what it's all about. Right? So that's not really relevant here. That's the reason why he has to recline. Okay, so I guess we'll stop here. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. B'ezras Hashem. We'll see you tomorrow. Sorry to make you wait. I apologize. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch.
Thank you so much, Kavod Harav.
All the best.